All right. Monday, Monday, Monday. Let's see. Are we live? Are we live? Yes, we are. Got a lot of news. Are we live? Got a lot going on. It's actually kind of crazy. We'll start off first with this. Some Liberal MPs issue an ultimatum to Trudeau. Make up your mind to stay or go by October 28th. More Liberal MPs saying, Trudeau, it is time to go. You are no longer welcome. Interesting. Will we get a response from Trudeau today? Probably not. Will Trudeau step down? Probably not. Will he resign? Probably not. But you know what I do know? Pierre Poilievre talking about Conservatives' immigration plan. Let's get into it, shall we? I don't know why they decided to have him start from all the way back there. He's walking a bit of a marathon to get to the microphones here, but it's okay. He'll make it.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Le Canada fait une promesse à tous ceux et celles qui sont nés
okay, well, let's just skip directly to the English.
Et nous immigrants. Et de logement. Very much everyone for being here today. Canada made me a promise. It makes all of us a promise, whether we're born here or arrive as immigrants. If you work hard, you get a good life. That anyone from anywhere can do anything. That hard work gets a powerful paycheck that buys affordable food and homes in safe neighborhoods. And that promise, like everything else, is broken after 9 years of Trudeau and the NDP Liberals. Most of all, he broke our immigration system. Today's immigration flip-flop is a massive admission of failure by Justin Trudeau, an admission that he's not worth the cost or the corruption. With his own MPs working to throw him out, and less than a year from the carbon tax election, Trudeau has suddenly admitted that radical, uncontrolled immigration and policies related to it are partly to blame for joblessness, housing, and healthcare crises. In fact, let's remember, after 9 years of Trudeau, we have 1 in 10 Torontonians lined up at food banks. We have 1,400 homeless encampments across the province of Ontario. 2 million Canadians have to go to a food bank every month. Scurvy is making a comeback. We have the worst economy in the G7. Everything is broken. And his immigration minister admits that that immigration is out of control after 9 years of Liberal policies. They increased population growth by 200% over the last several years alone. Now, Trudeau called anyone who disagreed with these radical policies racist. Now he's the one cutting immigration to pull back on the disastrous mistakes that he made. But worst, he destroyed the best immigration system in the world, a system that had a common sense consensus of Conservatives and Liberals for 150 years. Immigration was not even controversial before Trudeau came along. How did he do it? He left Roxham Road open for a year after President Biden offered to close it. He removed the visa requirement for Mexico, which caused an explosion of false and fraudulent refugee claims. And he allowed rampant fraud and abuse in the international student program, which has seen as many as 26 kids living in one Brampton basement and countless losing their lives to drugs, gangs, and other chaos on our streets, sent back in body bags to countries like India. He allowed ISIS terrorists into Canada, who then went on to try and attack Jews and other Canadian citizens. He's presided over a 251% increase in police-reported hate crimes. None of these decisions, by the way, were designed to bring workers to help with the COVID labor shortage, because none of those programs are labor programs. Roxham Road is not a labor program. Refugee claimants are not part of a labor program. International students are not supposed to be for labor, but for study. So this excuse is total nonsense. Trudeau's last-minute pre-election reversal cannot be believed. He can't fix the immigration system that he broke. And he now says he's going to cap immigration. Well, what else has he said he's going to cap? He said 6 months ago he was going to cap the number of temporary residents in this country to 5% of our population. Since that time, it's gone up to 7.3%. He said he'd cap the carbon tax at 11 cents a litre. Now it's 17 cents, and he plans to quadruple it to 61 cents. He said he'd cap this year's deficit at $40 billion. It's already $47 billion just 6 months later. You can't believe anything he says, especially when he's claiming that he will fix what he broke. Common sense conservatives will fix what Trudeau and the NDP Liberals broke. We will restore the best immigration system in the world. We will stop the illegal arrival of false refugee claimants by securing our borders, our ports, and our airports. We will end the abuse in the temporary foreign worker program, the international student program, and the refugee program. We will cap population growth so that it is always below the growth in housing, healthcare, and jobs. And we will, speaking of healthcare, we've got 20,000 immigrant doctors, 32,000 immigrant nurses in Canada today who cannot work because they can't get a license. We will create, in the professions, what we did as a country in the trades 7 decades ago. We will create a national licensing standard. Provinces can voluntarily adopt a blue seal so immigrant doctors and nurses can take a test, prove they're qualified, and get to work reducing those wait times in our hospitals. We will screen people coming in to keep terrorists and criminals out and allow law-abiding people into our country. And when they get here, they will see that the Canadian promise is restored. A promise that anyone from anywhere can do anything, where it doesn't matter where you come from, it matters where you're going. It doesn't matter who you knew, it matters what you can do. A country where hard work gets you a powerful paycheck.
Okay, so you can take all of that how you will or whatever you want to do with that. He sings a very sweet song, and I say this all the time. The laundry list for the Conservatives of them fixing Canada just gets longer and longer, and the things that Poilievre claims the Conservatives are going to do just increases more and more every time he speaks, and I don't even know, man. It's kind of gotten to the point where it's like he would have to fix so fucking much, and Trudeau has destroyed so fucking much. I don't even know at this point. Let's get into the SDTC. This has been going on for over a month now. The RCMP, the Liberal bought and paid for and backed RCMP, has claimed they have found a USB or have received or acquired a USB key with some sort of information. Whether it is going to play into this quote-unquote investigation they are doing, I don't know, but let's take a little listen here, shall we?
One other issue that's been permeating through Parliament Hill. It's actually got Parliament Hill at a standstill. It's a decision by an order by the House of Commons to ask the government to turn over documents related to something called Sustainable Development Technology Canada, SDTC for short. It's basically like a green tech fund that the Auditor General said was completely mired in conflicts of interest. The docs, what's interesting here is the order then provides for the documents to go, unredacted documents to go directly to the RCMP. The first question I have is, are you investigating what went on at the SDTC? Because a couple of months ago, the RCMP offered one answer, and then it seems as though lately there is an investigation. Are you investigating?
So I can confirm that we are investigating. And we're going, we did receive the motion that was put forth in the House of Commons. We did receive a USB key that we have stored for the moment. We're still going through available information that's out there to conduct investigation. And there are concerns. I've shared my concerns when it comes to the Charter of Rights. We're dealing with two different processes here. You're dealing with the legislative branch and the executive branch. And the concern that's been shared is the fact that we operate within a judicial process that's very strict. So if I need documents, I need grounds to go and get a search warrant to get those documents. And by going the other way, you're bringing documents that perhaps the police would never have any grounds to obtain these documents. So it's that balance. But what we're doing right now is we're going through everything that's publicly available, and then we'll assess what the next steps are.
What's a USB key? Like, what does that have to do?
Sorry, those little insert keys for the.
But like, what's that? What does that mean?
So
like,
that's
where
what,
the
what
documents
that
are?
yeah. So the law clerk. So what we had requested to facilitate our work, it was to make sure that every document was identified if it's parliamentary privilege and how it was obtained, because you got to understand that there's different process where the Office of the Attorney General, when she's doing her work, she operates through a certain set of rules, but those rules might be different when you come into criminal, in criminal space. So you just can't take a document from her and bring it in. There's a process to do that. So the information was downloaded on a stick, on a USB stick, and we have it in our possession.
And have you haven't looked through it yet, though?
We haven't gotten to that. We're exhausting everything we can in the public domain first.
And that stick that you have, is it your impression that that contains information that you otherwise would have had to, obtain a warrant to obtain? Because there's still documents outstanding. That's why we're at paralysis, basically, right?
Yeah, there's still
documents.
Documents out there, and again, I haven't seen what's on the stick, and I'll just comment to the fact that we're going to everything that's in the public domain. The ethics commissioner also has a report in which we're going through. If I go back to the auditor general, she did not see any criminality in her review, and by her mandate is if she does see any criminality, she should stop her investigation and refer it to the RCMP, which hasn't happened. We're going through the.
So why are you investigating them if you weren't a few months ago?
Well, we did. We did. There was a complaint, and we if we receive a complaint, we're investigating. So. And
where did that complaint originate?
I'd have to go back. I'm not quite sure. I'd love to tell you. It's no secret, but I just don't have it with me.
These are some pretty bad answers. I'm not gonna lie. A lot of what seems to be running around the question, and we're doing this, and we plan on doing that, and maybe one day we'll get to what is the actual answer. Probably not, though. Alright, the last thing that happened, I guess roughly 3 hours ago now. Pierre Poilievre, Conservative leader, outlines proposal to remove GST on new homes. This is a pretty long little speech he does here. I don't know if I'm going to watch all of it because I do want to see some of the House proceedings today, but we'll see how far we can get into this.
Bonjour tout le monde, merci d'être là.
And if it's in French, I'm just going to skip it.
Je fais porte à rentrer déjà avec de paix en antenne. Ce un grand chef récompense Justin Trudeau le coût de le coût moyen sans cette puis monter le G7 que Toronto pas de revenus en and sur et de logement au sens chez nous. Thank you very much, everyone, and now in English. It's
yes,
nice to
please.
be back in these beautiful Ottawa suburban neighborhoods. I've knocked on a lot of doors here, not in this particular neighborhood, but in the neighboring ones. And I have these memories of 29-year-olds opening these doors, saying, oh, we just moved in. We're having a couple of kids. We have a couple of kids. We got a dog. And this is our home. And that was normal, to have someone who was 28, 29, 30, moving into nice neighborhoods like this. That was because Canada had made a very simple promise. It wasn't anything revolutionary. It was just a very simple contract we had with the country. You work hard, you get a great paycheck, buys good food, and a nice home in a safe neighborhood. Very straightforward. And that's why millions of people came from around the world for that bargain. But after 9 years of Trudeau, that promise, like everything else, is broken. Housing costs have literally doubled. The average mortgage payment has gone from $1,400 to $3,200. The needed down payment for the average home has gone from $22,000 to $46,000. The average rent on a one-bedroom has gone from a measly $973 to now $2,200, roughly, after 9 years of Trudeau. It used to take 39% of the average family's income to make the average payment on the average home. every month back in 2015. Now it takes 60%. In Toronto today, it takes over 70% of your pre-tax income to make payments on the average home. In Vancouver, it's 98% of pre-tax income, meaning if you're in Vancouver today with the average income and you wanted to buy the average home, you'd have to stop paying taxes, stop eating, stop buying clothing, stop driving, stop vacationing, stop all forms of recreation, and it would still take 98% of all the money you had to make that monthly payment. Of course, that is mathematically impossible. No wonder there are 1,400 homeless encampments now in Ontario after 9 years of Trudeau and the NDP Liberals. 25% of Canadians live in poverty. 1/4 of kids go to school hungry every single day, according to the government's own data. Housing costs in Canada have risen 40% faster than incomes, the worst gap of any G7 country. In fact, Vancouver is now the 3rd most expensive, Toronto the 10th in the world when you compare median income to median house prices, and homes in the United States are between 25 and 45% cheaper than they are on the Canadian side of the border, proving this is not a global problem, it is made in Canada. Now, obviously, government gatekeepers that block home building are largely to blame for the fact that we have the fewest homes per capita in the G7, even though we have the most land to build on. But there's also the taxes. In Ontario today, 1/3 of the cost of every new home is direct taxes. That does not include the indirect taxes of, for example, income tax on construction workers and businesses, or all the paperwork and delays and consultants you have to pay just to get the building permits. I'm talking about direct taxes. So let's get this clear. When you buy a new home today, more of the money you spend goes to bureaucrats than goes to the carpenters, electricians, and plumbers who actually build the house. This is insane. The #1 cost for a home is government. Government bureaucrats, government taxes, government gatekeepers. 30%, as I said, is taxes, and 39% of all the taxes in a new home are federal taxes, including the GST. The GST, which adds $50,000 to the cost of $1 million home. It's a 5% federal tax. It was supposed to be indexed. You used to have a rebate on the first 450 grand of a new home back when the GST was instituted 3 decades ago. That threshold was supposed to go up every year, but it didn't. And now, good luck trying to get a house for 450 grand. You can't find anything for that after 9 years of Trudeau. So everybody basically is paying GST on their new home. The GST was not meant to apply to the basic necessities of food and housing. That's why the exemption existed in the first place. It is also why today I am announcing that a Pierre Poilievre-led common sense conservative government will axe the sales tax on new homes under $1 million. This will save about $40,000 on a new home of 800 grand. That would mean a savings every year of $2,200 in mortgage payments. Getting rid of the GST on new home builds will stimulate 30,000 additional homes built every single year, which incidentally will actually generate more income tax revenue for the government without raising rates. That will help cover the cost of the tax cut. But we will also cut bureaucracy. We're going to cut the programs that Liberals themselves admit haven't built any homes. The Accelerator Fund. Sean Fraser goes to the committee and says that the program doesn't build houses. And he's right. Since they gave $500 million to Toronto, home building's down by 20%, and development taxes are up by 40%. Money given to Vancouver has led to less construction and higher taxes. To Winnipeg, they gave Winnipeg money, and the Winnipeg City Hall blocked 2,000 homes next to a transit station built for those homes. Construction is down there as well. So while Trudeau and the NDP Liberals build bureaucracy, I want to build homes. Common sense conservatives will stop giving the money to bureaucrats, instead leave it in the pockets of home builders and home buyers. This is all part of our common sense plan to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. The purpose, as in everything we do, is to restore Canada's promise, to bring home a country where hard work earns a powerful paycheck and pension that buys affordable food and homes in safe neighborhoods like this one. Let's bring it home.
Thank you. We'll now take questions from the floor.
Oh, there's actually reporters here. He's actually going to answer some questions.
From CTV News. I wanted to know if you can confirm, first of all, that your plan that you're proposing today will save $8 billion annually. Also, can you list the programs that you'll be cutting to get to this number? And please, en anglais et en français.
So it will save $8 billion over. We're going to cut two programs for sure and more beyond that. One, the Accelerator Fund, has $3 billion left in it. It has been a disastrous program that has led to less home building and more local bureaucracies. $3 billion will be saved from that. And then the Housing Infrastructure Fund that hasn't built any infrastructure or any housing and hasn't even instituted any announcements. They're not even accepting applications yet. 6 months after it was announced, what they're doing with the money is building up a big fat bureaucracy in Ottawa. That will be gone. So that's a total of $8 billion over several years. Then we expect that we will collect about $2 billion more as a result of the 30,000 additional homes that will be built year after year because of this highly stimulative tax cut. It's going to spark more home building, which means more workers and businesses will be making money building homes. And therefore, at the existing rates, they'll be paying more into the system. So this includes about $16 billion in additional revenue and lower cost to the taxpayer, which is about the cost of axing the sales tax on home building over the next 4 years. Thank you. Merci de la question. Il y a premièrement, on va le faire de cette taxe, ça va coûter.
Not interested in the French. Just give me the English,
Les maisons
please.
vont économiser sur la TPS.
No.
Look, inciter plus d'approvisionnement de logements. The only thing that reduces costs is by having more affordable construction. And businesses will pass on those savings because if they don't, then buyers will buy from someone else. That's what competition means. You know, I asked the question, do you think that American builders are more generous? No, of course they're not. But the housing south of the border is 25 to 40% more affordable. And why is that? Well, because taxes are lower and permits are faster. And so when we have lower taxes and faster permits, we will have more homes, and those homes will be more affordable.
Next question.
Alex Ballingall with the Toronto Star. As I understand, you're talking about $4 billion in costs for this tax cut per year. Sorry. You talk about cutting the housing accelerator. As I understand it, you've already said you would cut that to fund the GST tax cut for new below-market rental builds. So how do you square those two things, and how would you pay for both of these tax cuts?
Yeah, the government put more money, amazingly, made the insane decision to put even more money into the Accelerator Fund because after it had failed to build homes. We're going to cut that wasteful program that has actually blocked home building and put it into axing the sales tax on new homes. Axe the tax on new homes to bring down the price by $40,000 on an $800,000 home. That saves $2,200. We're also going to get rid of the bizarrely named Housing Infrastructure Fund, which hasn't built any housing and hasn't built any infrastructure. That's a $5 billion fund. That'll be gone. And of course, we're going to get billions of dollars in additional revenue from the fact that construction workers and businesses are making more money building more homes. Thank you.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. Polyev. Stephanie Levitz with the Globe and Mail.
Sorry, I'm just going to get out of the sun here.
Yeah, no problem. It's warmer there, though. You've accused the Prime Minister.
Oh, you guys are actually there. I can see you now. No, I don't have the sun in my eyes. Okay.
Yeah, just voices in the mist. Okay. You've accused the Prime Minister of lying about having information that members of your party are complicit or otherwise involved in foreign interference. I wondered if you could flesh that out.
Here we go.
How
Good
do you
question.
know he's lying? Have you done anything internally to examine this problem within your party or made any changes?
He's probably not going to answer
We
it.
told him to release the names, and we know he'd release the names if he had them. This is a Prime Minister who releases information on foreign interference whenever it suits his political purposes. He names names
Cheers to that.
when it serves his purposes. And so we said, we've got nothing to hide, so name the names, Mr. Trudeau. If you've got nothing to hide, then come out, tell us who they are, so that all Canadians can hold them to account. And he hasn't done that.
We've
Because
been
I think
waiting.
The reality is that it's the Liberals who are compromised. We know that Trudeau was aware that in 2 subsequent elections, Beijing interfered to help him win. He had that information on his desk. He did nothing with it. He knew he had MPs in his caucus that were compromised. He didn't do anything about that until he was caught. So we can't trust anything Justin Trudeau says on foreign interference or anything else. And frankly, this is a man who has a track record of lying about basically everything. He lied when he said he didn't interfere and pressure Jody Wilson-Raybould on removing charges for SNC-Lavalin. He lied when he said the carbon tax would be capped at 11 cents a litre. Now we know it's going up to 61 cents a litre. He lied when he said his deficit would never go above $10 billion. He lies more than he tells the truth, and he's lying in this case as well.
Thank you. This will be the final question.
Morning, Rafi Boudjikani on CBC News. The Bloc Québécois has set a deadline of tomorrow for the Liberals to pass the pension top-ups. Is your party in conversation with the Bloc at all about next steps should that fail to happen? In English and French, please.
On n'a pas eu des conversations avec le Bloc, mais je me pose la question, qu'est-ce que le
What's
Bloc
up,
a
Mike? How's
obtenu?
it going?
Le Bloc a voté 180.
All right, so that's just going to be in French, and that's going to be the end of that. Let's go over to the House proceedings.
Those media.
Probably still talking about
5 of those 7
the,
committee members handed cash out to
SDTC,
their
if
own
I had to
companies.
guess.
In order for a media outlet to receive funding for a local journalist, they must promise to hand over the content of the local journalist produces, free of charge, to the Newswire Canadian Press. Guess which committee the head of the Canadian Press sits on? Everybody in the legacy media knows about this corruption, but not a single one will report on it, even after being called out in the House twice. Before this government, the biggest knock against the legacy media was their liberal bias. Thanks to this Prime Minister, Canadians can add corruption to their list of media complaints. And that's not surprising. Everything this Prime Minister touches becomes tainted by him. Sustainable Development Technology Corporation started over 20 years ago and had been a rare government success story. But then this bunch did what they've done to so many Canadian institutions. They ruined it. And what's so egregious is this never should have happened. This government was warned. The former president at SDTC warned the minister not to appoint a person.
What are the
who had
names? Put them in
received
chat.
funds from SDTC.
Put the names in chat.
That minister did it anyway. Now the organization's in shambles, and money's not going to qualified companies. Employees are demoralized because everything they touch becomes worse. How could it not under a prime minister who admires a basic dictatorship? At the core of his authoritarian streak is an ends that justifies means mentally. The Prime Minister sees jobs in his riding as an end, so he justifies obstructing justice and sacking an honest minister who got in his way. The Prime Minister saw a routine vote in the House of Commons as an end, so in the House of Commons as an end, so he justified physically assaulting another member of Parliament. The Prime Minister sees handing out cash to well-connected friends as an end, so he justifies ignoring Parliament to keep doing it. What every member of the Liberal Party needs to ask themselves before their next caucus is, when will they become the means to bring an end to this Prime Minister's misrule? And Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, the twin scandals with the Green Slush Fund and the Liberal Journalism Initiative are just the ones we can see from our side of the floor. We know this government hands out so much money so quickly with so few controls that it can fund a virulent anti-Semite to provide diversity training remotely from his home in Lebanon. Did anyone check to see if Laith Marouf was on any of those evacuation flights? We know we know that we are only standing at the base camp of a mountain of liberal corruption. This entire government's agenda since 2021 has been to create unaccountable pots of money for their friends. Every Canadian is receiving notices about increase in prices for streaming services. Spotify has gone up. Disney Plus has gone up.
Unsubscribe to Disney Plus. It's garbage anyway.
Finance Minister, of course there are increasing prices to pay for the new streaming tax. Those tax dollars then go to a fund controlled by the Canada Media Fund. That fund is controlled by big telecoms who pushed hard for this streaming tax. Now those dollars will flow to well-connected groups handpicked by Bell, Rogers, and the Liberal Party. Some will trickle down to a makeup artist on the set of CBC's Next American Cloned reality show, but most of it will end up in the pockets of Liberal-connected lobbyists. The Minister of Heritage surely knows what I'm speaking about. She is still listed as a lobbyist in the lobbyist registry. Talk about a well-connected Liberal. She went from lobbying for a streaming tax to implementing one. The Prime Minister doesn't need to dress up as a character from Star Wars again to put a Jedi mind trick. He just waves his hands to the media and says, "These are not all conflicts of interest you're looking for."
Okay,
Some believe
you
this world
messed
sits on
that
a
one
turtle,
up.
it sits on a turtle, and it's just turtles all the way down.
We just need to move on.
In Canada, it's just well-connected Liberals staffed at
Making jokes over $400 million plus in taxpayer money disappearing. My God, can we just get to the point here, Conservative leader? Or Conservative whoever you are.
in the past with the ghost of Mackenzie King. They cling to a dying broadcasting corporations whose heyday was in the 60s. Their foreign policy would feel more comfortable wearing bell-bottoms. Their race-based policies invoke an even older past. It shouldn't surprise anyone that the Liberals took this dark turn. This Prime Minister only came to rule them out of a mixture of desperation and nostalgia. He promised to make the Liberal Party great again, and they took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. Mr. Speaker, as I said at the outset, I've seen a Liberal Prime Minister's battle with Parliament before. What I've never seen is a Liberal Prime Minister who openly admired dictatorships for being ruthlessly efficient at tyranny. When we have someone as Prime Minister, for however long that may be, with a predilection for dictators, surfing to power on a wave of nostalgia, who now ignores the will of Parliament, it should be setting off more alarm bells than it currently seems to be. Fortunately, Canadians can count on common sense Conservatives standing up for Parliament, and it's time to bring home democracy.
Are those the actual names? Legit names and the parties too?
Question commentary, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary Gibbon House here.
Thank you. Interesting enough, Mr. Speaker, the member of Parliament who just spoke was a part of the Stephen Harper government. And so I'll remind her that her current leader of the Conservative Party was the parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister, who was the first Prime Minister in history of not only Canada, but in
the first of many. The first of many.
Contempt of Parliament. Then fast forward to today, where we get the now leader of the Conservative Party, I would ultimately argue, once again demonstrating his contempt of Parliament as they continue to play this filibustering game, Mr. Speaker. The question that I have for the member opposite is, would she not agree that instead of playing this game, we should be dealing with issues like foreign interference, in which her leader continues to refuse to get the security clearance required? He is putting his party and his self-interest ahead of the interests of the nations. Can she explain why?
The honourable member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Member opposite knows that if the leader of the opposition receives a classified briefing, he can't speak on the contents thereof without contravening the Official Secrets Act. And if one does so, they face years in prison. Mr. Speaker, the member from Papineau never applied for security clearances. Considering he's admitted to not disclosing his blackface past or his sexual assault of a reporter, even to his closest advisors, what else is the Prime Minister hiding from this Parliament?
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Longueuil, Saint-Hubert. Well, I think I might make you laugh a little bit. When I was an actor, I had the opportunity to work with a director that you might not know, but maybe my friends from Quebec will know, named Denise Filiatro, who was an excellent actor. She had a very particular style. And when I was working on scenes with her, she would often say that, there was a lack of rhythm, there was a lack of cohesion in the show. She wanted things to go more quickly. She'd get very impatient, and she would yell from the back of the room with her cigarette in her mouth saying, "Hey, when are we going to get to the punchline? You need to get some rhythm and you need to get going." So, Mr. Speaker, that's the way I feel right now. For the last 3 weeks, we've been talking about the same thing. Instead of talking about homelessness in Canada, instead of talking about the number of people who've died in the streets of Quebec, it's doubled in recent years.
Okay, not
this
just
is a
Quebec,
scandal.
all
We're
of
not talking
Canada,
about it
but
right
yeah,
now. So my
keep
question to
going.
my colleague, when will we get to the punchline here? When are we going to finally vote on this issue?
Yes, I actually agree with this guy. Holy, they've been just running around in circles. Let's get it going.
Line will be able to vote once the Prime Minister produces the documents that Parliament has asked for.
Questions and comments?
Alrighty then. So I guess never. This is never going to end.
The Liberal benches have alleged throughout this that it is the opposition that is grinding this place to a halt over this issue. And they set aside the issue that, of course, it is the government's own action and its own refusal to disclose the documents that has led members to wish to debate their corruption rather than move on to other business. But there is an important mechanism built into our system of Parliament that can break any impasse, Mr. Speaker. They can call an immediate election. So I'd ask the member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke, if she agrees that what the government really ought to do, if they can't disclose, table the unredacted documents and turn them over to the RCMP today, will they at least then just call an election and let's elect a new Parliament?
The honourable member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Mr. Speaker, I would have to agree with my colleague. This government is beyond redemption. Unless they table those documents as Parliament requests, they are in contempt.
In comments, the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my honourable colleague for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Oh,
I want
God.
to pick up on something she said, but it wasn't quite phrased this way. She said that the Liberal backbenchers had failed to take the actions that could replace the Prime Minister. I just want to draw the House attention to the admirable private members bill from the member for Wellington Halton Hills, which brought into place changes to the Parliament of Canada Act, which is generally known as the Reform Act, which each caucus of the recognized parties has an opportunity after an election to decide whether they're going to accept them or not. And so far, to give credit for grassroots democracy, only the Conservative Party adopted the Reform Act, and that's what allows the Conservatives to be in compliance with basically the practice of every other Westminster parliamentary democracy around the world, is that a caucus can choose to remove their leader, just as the Conservative caucus in the UK removed Margaret Thatcher and replaced her with John Major and so on. But I do recall the events that occurred on the floor back, as I can see, Mr. Speaker. I'll wrap quickly and say my recollection as an eyewitness to the events in 2016 were not that the Prime Minister attempted to disrupt democracy, but that numerous opposition members were blocking the passage of House leaders to walk forward to the Speaker. Good note to Speaker to know what our former colleague Jeff Regan didn't. You don't have to wait for the House leaders to march up forward. You can read the motion and the question and put it to a vote and not be concerned about obstruction, which was quite against our rules. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing Pembroke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it depends on everybody's perspective and where they were sitting at that point in time and what we saw that evening. In terms of the Reform Act, yes, I do have to thank my colleague from Halton who drafted that. And had the Liberals exercised that themselves in a way where there was no one who was controlling the outcome and there was no one bullying anyone else, they would now see from what's going on with their leadership how important it is to have a process to eject a leader if the leader is not adhering to what has been agreed to by caucus.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Waterloo.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to ask the member who's participating in this debate, and I'm pretty confident that she won't be able to answer this very simple question, but can she please let us know if there's any member in this House or any political party in this House who does not support this question of privilege? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing Pembroke.
Mr. Speaker, what I do know is that every member of every opposition group is in agreement that we have to have the documents that in question tabled in the House of Commons. I haven't done a one-on-one interview with each one to see whether or not we want this to go forward. What we ultimately want is for the documents to come forth so we can see what it is that the Prime Minister's hiding and what's so much worse than what we already know about.
Questions and commentaires.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for La Pointe de l'Île. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives have, we agree with them on this motion. However, when they were in government, they were also criticized by corruption in a number of cases. So I'd like to know, would a future Conservative government propose ways to diminish or eliminate corruption? The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing Pembroke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You may recall that the second thing that we did as government when the Conservatives formed government was enact a law to ensure that it would end corruption. And while it has worked well so far, it does need to be augmented. So we would bring in amendments to improve the Accountability Act, which our current leader shepherded through Parliament.
Resuming debate, and we'll hit right before a statement by members, but the honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we are now on the third week of debating this privilege motion.
The third week, I don't know about that. I think it's been over a month.
This House has come to a standstill, and it doesn't have to be this way. The blame lies foursquare on the shoulders of this Liberal government. And they're essentially snubbing their nose at Parliament and at you, Mr. Speaker, and ultimately the Canadian public. Parliament has a right to request documents and to hold the government to account. and to get accurate information so that we may or may not see, we don't know for sure, if there has been corruption at the expense of Canadians. This House requested that the documents related to Sustainable Development Technology Canada be provided based on damning reports from the Auditor General. The Liberals, they did produce some documents, but far from the number of documents that they were supposed to, and they blacked out page after page of the documents themselves. So we're getting, oh, that's very interesting information, not blackout. This is very interesting information, not blacked out. And it's a mockery, Mr. Speaker. It's a mockery of Parliament, and
our entire government is a mockery right now. This is just a joke. Come on, this has been going on for a month.
To rule on this violation. And the Speaker, I recognize you are the Deputy Speaker, but the Speaker, I have to commend him that he did actually examine carefully along with the table officers and came back saying that the Prime Minister and the Liberal government were in violation of members of Parliament's privilege. And that is why we are having this debate. So I know that there are questions, accusations from the Liberals saying, well, you're just trying to delay Parliament. Well, that's not the fact. The fact is, the Speaker ruled that they need to produce these documents, and they have not. And we're reminded of another situation not that long ago, where the Speaker, a Liberal Speaker, he's a Liberal member of Parliament in the Speaker's role, just as the Speaker is here also. And he ruled that the documents based upon the lab in Winnipeg be produced. What did the Liberals do? They would not produce these documents. And he ruled that they should produce them. What did they do? They said they would take court action against the Speaker of the time, the Liberal Speaker of the time. So it didn't go that far. He actually didn't see his day in court. Why? Because the Liberals thought, well, maybe this isn't the best of idea, taking someone that actually is a speaker that really was voted as a Liberal. So then maybe we'll just, here's an opportune time to call an election in the middle of the pandemic. So it's kind of like something they said they wouldn't do, but then they're taking advantage and hiding the information. So the information never came out. Probably damning information that would come out that would impact their electoral fortunes. And that's what they did. They blocked to prevent information from coming out. And that's what we're seeing again and again happening. So I hope the Speaker does not find himself in court by the decision that he has made. So the debate would stop, as I mentioned, if they would produce the unredacted document, which is our right. But the question is, why haven't they? I didn't ask why won't they, because there's still the slimmest of hope that they will do the right thing, the democratic thing, and produce the documents. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I'm hopeful. There is a slight possibility. We're still here. They can still act on it. So, but the public, all of us, are wondering, what's the big deal? Why don't they just do what the right thing, the appropriate thing, and produce the documents?
That's funny. That is hilarious.
Well,
That is so funny that he thinks they would do the right thing.
Long in the tooth and have run out of the steam, and they're happy to let the parliamentary calendar just waste away. It seems that way. We're on our third week. They don't seem to be very anxious to produce these documents. We want to get back to business. Actually, we don't. Yeah, good point from the Liberals. We want to be at business, but we don't like their business, because what they're doing, and this goes to my second point, is that maybe, Mr. Speaker, maybe they've had visions in the night, and they subconsciously recognize that Canada under them is going in a wrong direction under their mismanagement. They're recognizing this. And so they're saying, well, you know what? They're feeling maybe a bit of collective shame in their hearts. And they said, really, you know what? We should let this parliamentary calendar just continue to ebb away, because our actions are destroying this nation. Well, if that's the case, then I say I have to commend them. Kind of. You know, for example, maybe in that vision.
Oh, Christopher, you tried again, but you weren't fast enough, buddy.
Capital income of Canadians is going down, down, down under them. I remember when I was an MLA here in Ontario, but I was an MLA in British Columbia, and talking to people that would come visiting, even Americans, and they would just, this was during the Harper years, at that time, Conservative Parliament, and they were just amazed at how well the things are going in Canada compared with the United States, where the economy, where the housing situation, everything was going downward. It was under real distress, as opposed to what was happening here. It was a contrast between Canada and the United States of how things were going under Stephen Harper, Conservative Prime Minister, as compared to what was happening in the States. Well, Liberals have decided, well, maybe we don't want the Americans to feel bad when they come up here and see, well, wow, the Canadians are doing so well. We want them to feel good, so we're just going to destroy our nation economically. Our per capita income has gone down significantly. People are struggling financially to buy a home. So it's tough. Young people don't feel they're ever going to be able to buy a home. Well, I hope their good news is on the way, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that we're going to see a Conservative government soon, because, you know, even today we made the leader of the Conservative Party announced an initiative to remove the GST from all new housing built up to $1 million. That's about 5%. It's up to $50,000, not including the interest over, you know, the years. So that can easily double or more the value. This is a common sense approach, a help for young people to get our kick-start our housing, which has been going down under the Liberals. We anticipate 30,000 new homes built every year under this initiative. And we're also, leaders also announced that our intention is to encourage the provinces to remove their sales tax on all new housing production. Compare that with the Liberals. When they came in power in October 2015, it took 39% of the median pre-tax household income to cover home ownership. Now what is it? 60% of pre-tax. Basically, it's their full income and more. Like, people are drowning. And this a measure will generate new construction jobs, and this is good news and stands in stark contrast with the Liberals. Maybe in this vision in the night, among the Liberals, collectively all the same night, it's miraculous. But maybe they recognize that what they're doing is just making this country much less safe. And you know what? That would be true. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, violent crime is up 50%, while violent gun crime has increased 116%. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm giving you some numbers, 50%, 116%. Well, we're talking thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of Canadians suffering under violent crimes, gun crimes, and people getting killed. This falls on them. This is a lot of has to do with their policies, their legislation. So you're right. I am very happy to be debating this and not trying to pass or to oppose legislation that they bring forward in this House, because the majority, and I won't say everything, because I'm sure there must be one or two things, is decent. We could do better, but by far it is not helpful to Canada. It's taking us down. It's dragging us down. So we're quite happy to take our time. Again, Mr. Speaker, we don't have to be doing this if they would just comply to the Speaker's office request for them to do the right thing. But their heels are in. So is it because, again, this collective pang of conscience that they recognize how bad their legislation is? Now, they brag about banning firearms on law-abiding Canadians while completely ignoring gun smuggling and the crime wave unleashed by this government. The police associations, I think last week or the week before, from across this country were forced to correct the Prime Minister. Toronto Police Association, for instance, wrote the Prime Minister telling him that criminals did not get your message. They went on to say that our communities are experiencing 45% increase in shootings and a 62% increase in gun-related homicides compared to this time.
Look, this is all really bad and stuff, but I don't know what this has to do with the SDTC. He's kind of just gone off on a little rant here.
Easy. What difference does this is the Toronto Police Association saying to the Liberals, what difference does your handgun ban make when 85% of guns seized by our members can be sourced to the United States? Doesn't make sense, but then we come to expect that from the Liberals, unfortunately. This was followed by similar condemnations from the Vancouver Police Union and the Surrey Police Union. Vancouver Police Union wrote the Prime Minister saying that they're not aware that the Liberals, and really they're upheld by the NDP, are not aware of the ongoing gang war here in British Columbia, which I'm a member representing, an MP representing a community in Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge in British Columbia. Unaware of the gang war happening in BC, which is putting both our members as police officers and public at risk on a daily basis. Where do you think, addressing the Prime Minister, where do you think their guns are still coming from? Please, think about it. The Surrey Police Union also wrote that the Prime Minister's handgun bill freeze fails to address the real issue, the surge of illegal firearms coming across our borders and ending up in the hands of violent criminals. Conservative government will deal not with duck hunters, but with criminals, Mr. Speaker. Maybe the Liberals recognize that their incompetency as demonstrated by overdose deaths. Under them, 47,000 deaths, and many more dying every day. 47,000. Mr. Speaker, I'm wearing a poppy as we're approaching Remembrance Day. Do you know there are tens of thousands of Canadians that lost their lives on the battlefield, but there are actually many more that have died from this opioid crisis just alone. That's the staggering number of deaths due to the opioid crisis. And they're just making things worse and worse. They don't know what's going on.
Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't have made that comparison, opioid crisis, to people who lost their lives in World War II, or just in any war. That was a strange one.
From this crisis, and it's a terrible situation here in Canada. On Friday, I was in my constituency office. majority of the time when I go outside the back door of my office, Mr. Speaker, I see people, shattered people, taking drugs on fentanyl highs. On Friday, 3 times, just behind my office, the ambulances had to come. People lying down right in the middle of the parking lot. Like this is under 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, and it's a shame. It's terrible. There needs to be a change. Maybe, Mr. Speaker, the reason why they're letting this drag on is because it's for their pensions. Now, I sure hope not, and maybe that's just a comment, but you kind of have to wonder, why are they doing this? Why, when so many millions of Canadians are struggling, I hope that the reason that they're not calling a carbon tax election is for their own paycheck, whether it be as a cabinet minister, whether it be for the pension, whatever it may be. I sure hope not, Mr. Speaker. Maybe the reason why they're not producing the document and they're just allowing this debate go on is because they want to prorogue Parliament to try and reset things, to deal with their internal chaos, Mr. Speaker. This would be an opportune time to prorogue Parliament, saying, oh, it's not working well together, to have a leadership race. Matter of fact, 24 Liberal MPs signed a letter asking the Prime Minister to step down. Carbon tax, Mark Carney is waiting in the wings. Christy Clark has announced. Vultures are circling. No disrespect meant to my the individuals. I'm just saying that things are bleeding. And I think I was reading today about Jody Wilson-Raybould, former Liberal Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. She said that the Prime Minister simply is not capable of self-reflection. The Prime Minister remains not in the interest of Canadians, Mr. Speaker, not even in the interest of my colleagues in the Liberal benches here. He's not there for them. He's not here, certainly not here for Canadians. But it would appear that his interest is himself, the ability to jet set around the world, hobnobbing with elites. That's what it would appear like from here. And I have a good idea that some of the members on the Liberal benches feel it's the same thing, if you watch the news. And the last reason, Mr. Speaker, now I got 1 minute, so I'll introduce this as a teaser. Maybe I'll get some questions on this, because I got a few minutes afterwards. Maybe, and I think this is really, it's this. The Liberals really do have something to hide. I think that may be the reason why. Oh, yeah. You think so? I think so. Yep. They maybe really do have something to hide. They don't want any more biopsies. They don't want to know the public to know how far this cancer has spread, Mr. Speaker. Now, my wife, she had cancer, breast cancer. It's 9 years now. She had five operations, and they tested to see, they tested different lymph nodes to see if it had metastasized. Thank God, it hadn't. It's 9 years later, and I'm thankful she's here with me. Tremendous support. But maybe the Liberals know that this cancer, which is what we're dealing with right now, has metastasized all throughout their government, and they don't want it to get the public to know. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So I hope all honourable members will forgive me. I allowed the honourable member to exhaust his time for his 10 minutes of
uh-oh, Greg's here.
Speech. When we resume debate on this matter, he'll have 10 minutes of questions and answers. Statements by members.
Statements.
Déclaration de député. L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every day in Canada, 30 individuals are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and more than 100,000 people in Canada are now living with Parkinson's, including my sister Paula and my wife Barbara. There's currently no test to confirm Parkinson's, and diagnosis can take a time. There's currently no cure. Tomorrow between 9 a.m. and noon in Wellington Room 310, I'm pleased to co-host a roundtable with Senator Green and Parkinson Canada, where we'll all discuss the growing economic burden of Parkinson's, innovative care models, and current research to improve the lives of those diagnosed with Parkinson's. I'm proud to support research into neurodegenerative disease.
So instead of maybe like sending some more money into research and development to maybe try and help combat these things, or, you know, just trying to help our medical industry as a whole, we've doubled down on sending more and more money to Ukraine. Billions and billions of dollars, as a matter of fact. Instead of worrying about the issues here, we continue to do that.
Remembrance Day week, let's take a moment to recognize those who have bravely served Canada in times of war, conflict, and peace. We gather at Remembrance Day services to honor and pay tribute to Canadians who made the ultimate sacrifice defending democracy and human rights around the world, as well as those who continue to serve today. By remembering, we pay tribute to Canadian Armed Forces and RCMP members who serve to defend our values and freedoms. Kelowna Lake Country has British Columbia Dragoons, 39 Signal Regiment, Royal Canadian Legion Branch 26 in Kelowna and 189 in Oyama, and Army, Navy, and Air Force Veterans in Canada Unit 367, who all play roles supporting veterans and their families and help educate the next generation. The Field of Crosses display, a multi-partner community service memorial project in Kelowna City Park, is an impactful visual reminder of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. And Buying Poppy supports our local veterans. May we never take their sacrifice for granted, lest we forget.
The Honourable Member for Vimy. Mr. Speaker, today, on this Ochi Day, we paid tribute to the courage of Greece, the cradle of democracy, for its steadfast refusal in the face of tyranny.
In 1940, a resolute no, Ochi, from Greece's Prime Minister Metaxas to the Axis powers ultimatum was a choice to protect Greece's sovereignty and democratic ideals from fascist and Nazi tyranny that had swept over Europe. This stance was not only a military decision, but a powerful moral one. Greece, with its rich democratic heritage, became a beacon of resistance, reminding nations everywhere of the profound cost and importance of liberty. In a world overshadowed by authoritarian regimes, Greece's defiance in history reminds us of the importance of protecting both freedom and democracy.
Today we celebrate not just an act of bravery, but an enduring commitment to the ideals we all share.
Zito 28 Οκτωβρίου 1940, Zito η Ελλάς, Zito Canada, Zito.
What are we saying here? What was that?
The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, I feel particularly kind today, so I'm going to do you a favor. You can rejoice because I found in my county an incredible whiskey that you cannot miss. It's sure to become the Speaker's new whiskey. It's 100% organic, 100% made in Quebec, with a taste to die for. Le Pembroke whiskey is the latest creation from the distillery.
Okay, I'm not giving you a sponsor for your whiskey company out here in Quebec. Get out of here with that. Everything going on in the world right now, and you're gonna promote a whiskey company? What the fucking... How out of touch do you gotta be?
Grain to bottle, from the earth to your glass. I defy anyone in this house to present you with a whiskey this good.
Okay, enough of the whiskey talk, buddy. Let's get to the actual matters at hand here. Like, if this doesn't prove how much of a joke our parliament actually is, where they're promoting a whiskey. What are you doing? The Bloc at its finest, doing nothing.
Health. The Honourable Member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, the Governor-General of Canada, Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Mary Simon, has awarded me 20 coronation medals from His Majesty Charles III. I would like to present the recipients for their outstanding contribution to Canada.
Madoua Nika Fanor-Cadet, Deborah Cherenfant, Connie Cusano, Louis-Edgar Jean-François, Gracia Kasoki-Katawa, Manuel Mathieu, Stéphane Morin, Émilie Nicolas, Jean-Ernest Pierre, Frédéric Pierre, Lucie Santos Rodrigues, Chantal Rossi, Beverly Salomon, Nathalie Sanon, Ronnie Sanon, Comlanté Cedro, Édouard Stacco, Rodney Saint-Éloi, Martine Saint-Victoire. Toutes mes félicitations.
Congratulations to all of them.
Yeah, it's a necessary service for the Green Party leader. That's for sure.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, everything is broken. Their failed and woke policies made Canadians poor and broke Canada's economy, sending 2 million Canadians into a food bank. The housing minister first broke immigration and now housing, as he doubled rents and mortgages. He brought record amounts of newcomers to Canada without available homes, jobs, or health care. The finance minister broke the economy as GDP per person is in decline for 6 consecutive quarters, meaning weaker paychecks, higher prices, and less competition. And this Prime Minister broke Canada by making Liberal insiders rich while ignoring the cost of living, housing, and crime crises he created. They called anyone who questioned these radical policies racist, even though the Prime Minister did racist blackface more times than even he can remember. Common sense Conservatives will unleash the economy, bring home powerful paychecks, and lower prices by axing the tax, building the homes, fixing the budget, and stopping the crime, and bringing home the Canada that we all once knew and still love. We're going to bring it home, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker.
Around the world celebrate the famous no, όχι, which refers to the response given by the Prime Minister of Greece, Ioannis Metaxas, on October 28, 1940, to an ultimatum given by the Axis forces to allow them to enter Greece in order to occupy strategic locations within the country.
Metaxas replied with the words, "Then it's war." The rejection of this ultimatum led the Axis forces to attack Greece. They expected it to fall quickly, but Greek resistance pushed Italy back in less than a month and forced Hitler to change his plans, delaying his invasion of Russia by at least 2 months.
Sir Winston Churchill, if there had not been the virtue and courage of the Greeks, we do not know which the outcome of World War II would have been. Today we honor the Greek heroes who fought with courage to defend our values. Zito η Ελλάδα, zito ο Καναδάς, χρόνια πολλά σε όλους τους Έλληνες.
The Honourable Member for Markham Unionville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to address the serious issue of foreign interference in Canada. Recent RCMP investigations have uncovered evidence linking agents of the Government of India to violent criminal activities on Canadian soil, including targeting of South Asian Canadians. Mr. Speaker, this interference is a direct threat to our national security and public safety. In Markham Unionville, home to a vibrant South Asian community, families are fearful and community leaders are concerned about intimidation. No Canadian should live under the threat of foreign interference or violence. Canada will not tolerate any nation threatening our people or undermining our sovereignty. 6 Indian diplomats have been expelled, and we urge the Government of India to cooperate fully with our investigation. We will always defend our values, protect our citizens, and uphold the laws of the land. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. The record of 9 years as NDP Liberal government will be one of waste, corruption, and no respect for Canadian taxpayer dollars. This legacy will include $400 million slush fund, which violated its own conflict of interest policy 186 times. A 223 in-flight catering bill for one trip for this Prime Minister. The Parliamentary Budget Officer estimates the Liberal government will run a $46.8 billion deficit this year. The Liberals have missed their own spending target by $7 billion. Meaning that they have blown away all of their fiscal anchors, leaving Canadians adrift amongst a fiscal nightmare. Enough is enough. This runaway spending and corruption train must be stopped with a carbon tax election so that Canadians can elect a common sense Conservative government that will fix the budget and end this inflationary spending.
The Honourable Member from Sault Ste. Marie.
Speaker, attempts at foreign interference, unfortunately, have become a reality in Canada and around the world.
And I wonder who's allowed that, Mr. Terry Sheehan? Who's allowed that to happen, buddy?
And Iranian attempts to influence. Our country and our leaders must be prepared to confront these challenges head on. And that is what leaders do. They take these issues seriously. They learn about them, and they work with our national security officials to prevent them. They do not stick their heads in the sand. The leader of the Conservative Party is the only leader in this House who has chosen not to obtain the security clearance needed to
Here we go. We got the security clearance again.
safe. Will the leader of the official opposition come out of hiding, get the security clearance, take the security brief, and keep Canadians safe? Thank you very much, Speaker.
The honourable member from York Simcoe.
Mr. Speaker, life has never been...
Yeah, at the top of the chat there, I have a pinned comment of 4 of the different, or at least 4 names that are involved with the foreign interference.
2 million Canadians relying on food bank every month just to survive. Many of these food banks regularly run out of food because of skyrocketing demand, with lines stretching for blocks. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. His failed agenda has forced people into choosing between paying rent, heating their homes, or putting food on the table. And the Liberals have only made it worse by increasing the carbon tax by 23%, with plans to quadruple it and force even more Canadians to go hungry. Canadians may not be well fed, Mr. Speaker.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Keep the names rolling. Don't just stop because you got 4 people out here. Keep going. Expose every single one of them. This needs to end, man. This can't continue.
The honourable member from Langley Aldergrove.
Today, the leader of the Common Sense Conservatives announced that we will be axing the federal sales tax on...
As of right now, I think those are the only 4 names that have been, been listed. There may or may not be more. We'll have to see in the upcoming days.
Homeowners will save $50,000 on $1 million home purchase, reducing their mortgage payments month after month, year after year. This tax cut will also spark the construction of 30,000 extra homes every year, and this means more homes for young families that are trying to get into the real estate market for the very first time.
Hear, hear.
But where are we after 9 years of the NDP Liberals? Double the rent, double the mortgage payments, double the down payment, and 80% of Canadians feel that home ownership is only for the very wealthy. But rest assured, Conservatives will put an end to these failed Liberal housing programs, and we will actually build the homes as we have done in the past and as we are doing with today's announcement. Let's axe the tax and build the homes.
The Honourable Member for Glengarry Prescott Russell. Mr. Speaker, almost 2 years ago, we learned that several countries, including China, Iran, Russia, and India, attempted to interfere in Canada's democratic processes. Last June, the Committee of Parliamentarians on National Security Intelligence tabled a report alleging that some parliamentarians are wittingly or unwittingly participants in foreign interference in Canadian politics. These are serious and disturbing allegations that have cast doubt on our democratic institutions. Since then, all but one of the opposition leaders have chosen to obtain their security clearance to act on foreign interference within their party. The public inquiry into foreign interference has clearly shown that every member of this House has a responsibility to fight foreign interference in our democracy. And I have a simple question for the leader of the Conservative Party. When is he going to obtain his security clearance and stop putting his head in the sand and put the security of Canadians ahead of partisan politics?
Order. The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
For over 110 years, the Bissell Centre has supported people in Edmonton experiencing poverty and houselessness. Their mission is to save lives, Mr. Speaker. They serve individuals facing complex challenges like intergenerational trauma, addiction, food insecurity, unemployment, and housing vulnerability. Of those accessing their services, 67% identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. Their holistic wraparound services go far beyond just housing supports. Last year, the Bissell Centre supported over 9,000 people experiencing the worst outcomes of poverty. They housed over 500 people and supported an additional 675 community members in eviction prevention. Mr. Speaker, I think you would agree that organizations like the Bissell Centre are a vital resource for our communities. And I urge the Government of Canada to work with and provide urgent support for organizations such as the Bissell Centre. The workers at the Bissell Centre are the very best of us, and we owe them our tremendous thanks. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, proud of my Quebec and Peruvian roots. I'll start again. Mr. Speaker, proud of my Quebec and Peruvian roots, I'd like to highlight the importance of Latin American Heritage Month. Throughout the month of October, I think of my mother born in Peru and who, after completing her doctorate in the U.S., chose to settle in Quebec, embracing the Quebecois vision of a strong social fabric, resilience, and tolerance. Latin Americans are the second largest ethno-linguistic immigrant group in Quebec. As October draws to a close, let's acknowledge the significant impact of these communities made up of people like my mother. From Mexico to Chile and the Caribbean, the richness of their cultures and their vibrancy can be felt throughout Quebec. By highlighting their unique contribution to Quebec society, we are reminding ourselves of our commitment to an inclusive and cohesive society. As the Spanish often say, diversity enriches us. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Parry Sound, Muskoka.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians...
Because it's story time in Parliament. They don't want to talk about the real issues. They just want to talk about where they came from.
...the price. But the good news is that common sense Conservatives will deliver results. A Conservative government will axe the tax on new homes sold. On an $800,000 house, this tax could save a homeowner $40,000. That's $2,200 a year in mortgage payments. A common sense tax cut like this will lead to an additional 30,000 homes being built each year. In Ontario and British Columbia, government charges...
Yes, but are those homes affordable to begin with, or are they just going to be over $900,000 homes just being put up again? Nearly $1 million homes being put up. They need to make affordable housing.
Doubled mortgage payments, he's doubled the down payment. Common sense Conservatives will bring home real solutions to the housing crisis that this Prime Minister created.
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds. Mr. Speaker.
The MP is a representative of Canada in this House. Each and every MP has a responsibility to protect against foreign interference in our democracy. For the few who lead political parties, that responsibility to defend and protect our democracy is much heavier. Yet the Conservative leader refuses to get his security clearance so that he can see top secret documents. Why is the Conservative Party leader continuously refusing to get his clearance? Out of all 5 party leaders, all but one, the Conservative leader has refused to be security cleared. What is he hiding? What is he running away from? The Conservative leader in no way, shape, or form is qualified to be critiquing our government on matters of national security. He must not and should not have a single day in government. This is nothing but common sense.
Yeah, no GST on houses under $1 million would be great. Question period has begun. It looks like Scheer is here.
This NDP Liberal government, it's clear the Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing. He created housing hell by doubling rents, mortgage payments, and the needed down payment. And as housing prices skyrocket, the greedy federal government rakes in the cash. The Prime Minister now collects more in taxes on the sale of a new home than the carpenter or electrician that actually builds the house. The solution? Our common sense plan to axe the federal sales tax on new homes. On an $800,000 home, this will save a home buyer $40,000. So why not provide some much needed relief and axe the tax off of new homes?
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to see the Conservatives have taken some inspiration from our plan in removing the GST to help get more homes built. But what's completely unacceptable is how they say they're going to pay for it. And this is telling about their strategy across a range of policy areas. They want to cut the programs that are going to deliver housing for low-income and middle-class families today, just like they plan to cut the programs that are going to provide dental care for families who need it, like they plan to cut the programs that will deliver birth control to Canadian women for free, like the way that they oppose programs to support seniors with pensions, students with student loans, and families with the cost of raising kids. It's time to build, not cut.
I entirely agree. It's the tip of the iceberg, and we probably won't get any further than that.
Actually, the Liberals' own housing advisor said that the Liberal plan is, quote, turning out to be nothing more than a heist of tax dollars flowing from the feds to municipalities. They fund bureaucracy and photo ops, not build new homes. It used to be in this country that it took 25 years for the average family to pay off their house. Now it takes 25 years just to save up for the down payment. Our plan on an $800,000 home will save a new home buyer $2,200 a year in mortgage payments. $800,000 used to buy you a mansion. Now you're lucky if you get 4 walls and a roof in Toronto and Vancouver. So why not adopt our plan and axe the tax off of new homes?
Toronto, Vancouver, two of the most expensive cities to live in.
Mr. Speaker, when he says adopt their plan to cut the supports for cities who are going to build homes, the plans to cut the money that's actually going to build the infrastructure to make home building possible. He talks about bureaucracy. He must not have read the line in his own plan that says that they want to hire new bureaucrats just to run a snitch line if you don't like your neighbor's housing policies. They came up with this stuff on the backside of a napkin after Googling housing for 5 minutes. When you actually talk to the people who have experience building homes, they will tell you how to get it done. We're going to follow the advice of the people who are building homes and talk to the people who have lived experience with housing needs.
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
This from the minister who admitted at committee that his housing plan doesn't actually build homes. Their plan funds bureaucracy and photo ops. And the more the Liberals spend, the less they build and the more Canadians have to pay. Since this Prime Minister started giving hundreds of millions of dollars to city politicians, housing starts are down. They're down 10% in Ottawa, 15% in Winnipeg, and down 20% in Vancouver and Toronto. So why won't the government adopt our common sense plan to build the homes by axing the tax?
Yes, we should not have a separate policing system here from China. Out of, just no other country, period, should have their own policing system here. I don't understand it either. People that are trying to literally escape communism, escape dictatorships, and then they end up bringing these exact same things, the very things that they are trying to run away from here. Our government is just insane.
They want to cut housing, they want to cut healthcare, they want to cut supports to families, and that is completely unacceptable.
You hear it all the time in the States too. People who have legally immigrated into the States, they have escaped dictatorships, they've escaped communism, they've escaped poverty, they've escaped the country they used to live in because it was terrible. And then you see the people that are currently in power trying to implement Marxist ideas, communist ideas, these different ideologies that do not work in a Western society. And they are fundamentally annihilating Western society by doing it. And you have these people who have legally immigrated, and they're looking at this going, what the actual hell are you guys doing? You don't understand how truly bad it is over in those other countries. You don't understand how good you have it here. People like this right here, Chrystia Freeland, perfect example of destroying the country.
Leader gave an honest answer about his plan to make cuts. He said, we are going to cut programs, 2 for sure, and others that are underway. Under the Conservatives, Canadians will have fewer homes built more slowly. They'll have more costly visits to the dentist, later retirements, and families will have fewer supports. These cuts are completely unacceptable. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' housing advisor said this morning that the Liberals' photo ops plan, the plan to accelerate home building, is useless and inefficient. You know, we've always assumed in Quebec that young people would be able to dream of having a home, but unfortunately, after 9 years of the Liberal bloc, the boss of Desjardins has confirmed that young people are going to have to wait 10-15 years longer than their parents before becoming homeowners. They won't be young anymore by the time they can afford a house. We need to get going. A generation is waiting. When will the Liberal bloc accept our common sense proposal to axe the GST on new homes? The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Economic Development. Once again, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party is giving a clear example of how, for everything they want to put in place, they're going to make a cut somewhere else. So, healthcare, social programs, and now today they're saying that they're going to cut the housing accelerator. Mr. Speaker, how can this member who comes from Quebec tell the government of Quebec that he wants to cut 8,000 affordable social homes in Quebec? Because that's what he's just told Quebecers today, Mr. Speaker. I would invite honourable members, if they wish to ask questions, to please put their name on the lists. And the Speaker will be very happy to recognize them. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Everyone in Quebec is worried about our ability to welcome so many asylum seekers. But the number of asylum requests might go up because there are elections coming up in the United States in 8 days, and Trump has promised, as he said yesterday in New York, that as of day one, he'll launch the biggest program of deportation in the history of the country. He said he would deport up to 18 million people. Many Americans are very worried about this, but it should also worry the federal government. Does the government have a plan if migration from the United States suddenly becomes a flood? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Yes. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. If people are afraid of being deported by Trump, they might wish to leave the United States.
God.
They could be many to consider going north instead of south. And remember, the last time that Trump promised deportations, it started off what we saw at Roxham Road, and we're still living with the consequences of that 7 years later. Governing means planning. It's not just saying yes. So, without assuming what the results of the election will be, can the government please reassure us that there's a plan in case there's a massive increase in the number of asylum seekers, and not just say yes?
Yes, let's just not take them in because we can't afford it. We don't have the space.
Mr. Speaker, yes, we have a plan.
If Trump goes in and deports everybody, the illegal immigrants, the ones that illegally went into the States, he's going to deport them back to the countries they came from. I don't understand why the Canadian government thinks that Trump is just going to deport everybody to Canada. What insane idea is this?
Seeing hateful anti-choice rhetoric creep into Parliament, spread by the Conservatives under their leaders' watch. Right. Clinic 554 closed in New Brunswick, and abortion care across Canada has been chipped away at. So while the Liberals' words are nice, their lack of action is dangerous. Yeah. Will the Liberals stop their grandstanding and start making sure every person in Canada has equal access to abortion care?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, absolutely. That's exactly what we're doing and working with provinces and territories to make sure that the investments that we have in sexual health are there to make sure that women have access to an abortion. That's why we're advancing the work we're doing on pharmacare to make sure that women have both the contraception and access that they need. But on the point, and this is an extremely important point, when the Conservatives have such a huge number of people in their caucus who are anti-choice, who are standing up against women's rights, we have to call that out. A woman has full autonomy and right over her body. There is no member of this legislature or anybody who should claim to have authority over a woman's body.
The Honourable Member from North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, it's very hard to implement a right when the
Yeah, it's actually insane how much housing has gone up. My parents bought the house we used to live in for roughly 300 and let's say 50,000 and sold it for roughly 800,000. And they bought it back in like 2003, 2005, sold in 2020. So what the actual hell has happened to where housing has gone up more than double? My aunt and uncle, they bought their house for roughly 230,000. and they could most likely sell it for over $700,000. So what has actually happened in the past 20 years? 20 years that it has gotten this expensive.
At risk, Mr. Speaker, a Conservative caucus over there with a third of their members having been greenlit by anti-choice organizations across this country, members across the aisle who have voted consistently for backdoor anti-abortion legislation, and a leader that will not stand up for the rights of women in this country. That's what's putting the risks of women's health at great jeopardy in this country, and we're not going to stand for it, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Foothills.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals just aren't worth the cost. Today, Hunger Count revealed more than 2 million Canadians went to a food bank in March, up 6% from the previous year. And food bank...
I actually don't know how many are performed a year or how many are done per year, but they sure as hell like to talk about this point a lot.
The carbon tax 23%, leading to record-breaking food bank use. They're not done. They want to quadruple that tax. Will the Prime Minister end the suffering he has caused and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize that we've been living through expensive times, and that's exactly why we've made investments in Canadians and their families. Investments like the Canada Child Benefit, Mr. Speaker, introducing the Canada Disability Benefit, increased investments in housing, Mr. Speaker.
The Canada Child Benefit after just talking about abortion. That's interesting.
And now has announced his plans to cut even further. We will fight for Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Foothills.
I'm glad at least one Liberal minister understands Canadians are living in expensive times that their policies caused. But let me help her with their answer. Food insecurity in Canada is up 111%. 2 million Canadians went to a food bank in a single month. Food inflation is a staggering 37% higher in Canada than it is in the United States. The Parliamentary Budget Officer already confirmed what Canadians know: the carbon tax is all pain, no gain. Will the Prime Minister stop his tax tricks and give Canadians the treat of a carbon tax election this Halloween?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker,
oh, brace your ears.
We have known for a very long time that the Conservatives are crying crocodile tears when it comes
Oh, but you're the crocodile lady, Chrystia Freeland.
Today, the Conservative leader actually admitted it. He said, and I quote, "We're going to cut 2 programs for sure and more beyond that." So now we know. They're going to cut childcare. They're going to cut the Canada Child Benefit. They're going to
So they're going to cut childcare, they're going to cut... Hold on. The Liberal Party is trying to make a point here about childcare, child health benefits. The same party that is talking about abortion. Kind of interesting, isn't it?
The floor unless recognised. The honourable member from...
You almost start to wonder what they're actually even arguing at the end of the day.
Not worth the cost or hunger. Food Banks Canada came out with a report that more than 2 million Canadians visited a food bank in March, a 6% increase from last year. 1 in 5 of those food bank users are workers, 70% are renters, and as Canadians' incomes decline, this government doubled housing costs and rent. Canadians' incomes are lower than they've ever been. And starving Canadians further that this woke NDP Prime Minister will quadruple their carbon tax scam. Why not just call a carbon tax election now and let Canadians decide?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is that everywhere in the
Well, yeah, it's just ass backwards when they say that they're going to promote childcare and child health care, but at the same time offer those services as well. I don't know, it does seem like it's kind of countering the whole thing of child health care, but I don't know.
reference the United States. Do you know in the United States that the life expectancy is 5 years lower? Did you know in the United States that the average citizen has 6 more years in illness and disease? That's what their cuts would bring. That's the truth of what they're offering.
Okay, well, the Americans also like to eat incredibly unhealthy food, but let's blame it on cuts that Conservatives bring.
Scurvy back to Canada. And they don't want to talk about the 2 million Canadians that they sent into a food bank in a single month, a third of which are children. They don't want to talk about going down the path of their radical plan to quadruple the carbon tax when they know 1 in 4 Canadians are already skipping meals and 1 in 5 food bank users are workers. They also don't want to talk about the fact that their plan was to always double housing costs. Why don't they just do everyone a favor? Why don't these economic arsonists stop gaslighting Canadians and call a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, what else is back? Tuberculosis, measles, syphilis. Why does this happen? It's because the slogan machines on the other side, diving deep into the threads on Reddit, are creating and spreading information that confuses the health landscape and means that things that we had long put behind us come back. We cannot afford the kind of misinformation and the kind of nonsense that they spin, not only because it is not true, but because it put lives at risk, Mr. Speaker.
In kindergarten? Oh my God. That is not right.
Not worth the cost. Today, Food Banks Canada released their 2024 hunger count, and the stats are heartbreaking.
Kids that young should not even be worrying about anything in those sort of aspects. Kids that young should be learning their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, not their LGBTQs.
Even more by quadrupling the carbon tax. Canadians can't afford him. His caucus doesn't want him. So why doesn't he let Canadians decide what they want and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when Canadians
Oh,
are
Crocodile
facing
Lady
tough
1 and
times,
2.
what should a government do? They should provide programs that provide supports to them, like the Canada Child Benefit, like making childcare more affordable, like dental care for seniors in vulnerable
Oh, they
communities.
keep bringing up this child health care and child care benefit, but it backfires so quickly when the topic of abortion gets brought up.
Tough. Mr. Speaker, we know the Conservative plan, and it's to balance the books on the backs of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we won't stand for that. We're going to stand for Canadians. Thank you.
Very good.
The Honourable Member from Peterborough Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians will not stand for that gaslighting. After 5 years, in the last 5 years,
the
food bank usage has
gaslighting.
doubled. It is the highest in history. People who used to volunteer at the food bank are now lining up to use it. Food banks are running out of food in Canada. Mr. Speaker, please, for the love of God, let them call a carbon tax election. This Prime Minister doesn't seem to understand the human consequences of his policies, that when you tax the farmer who grows the food, the trucker who ships the food, you end up taxing the Canadian who has to buy the food into poverty. Enough. Call a carbon tax election.
Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
$7,782 a year
Uh-oh.
tax-free. That's the Canada
Uh-oh.
Child Benefit that has helped lift over 450,000 children out of poverty.
Uh-oh.
What that member is calling gaslighting is real money that's helping real Canadians. Who's doing the gaslighting, Mr. Speaker?
What the hell is she wearing? She looks like a UPS driver.
Instead of solutions, it's them who say that they can fix things while cutting the services and the programs that Canadians rely on. We're going to do real things that help real people. That's what we do on this side of the House.
Beautiful.
Ask the Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon, please, to not take the microphone and not take the floor unless he's recognised by the Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Montcalm. On October 30th, Quebec will finally allow advanced requests for medical assistance in dying. And yet the health minister is still setting up roadblocks. Last week, he said that Quebec was moving too quickly, and he even suggested that it was possible that he might challenge the move. Mr. Speaker, Quebec isn't going too quickly. It's been preparing for years, and for years, patients like Sandra de Montigny have been fighting for this day. Will the minister cooperate instead of setting up roadblocks? The Honourable Minister of Health. Always, Mr. Speaker, we're always ready to cooperate, and on such a delicate subject as advanced requests, it's absolutely essential that we make sure that there is a national conversation, and also to make sure that our system is ready. we need to make sure that we take the time necessary with this subject, because it's absolutely essential to make sure that the right choice is made. The Honourable Member from Okan. October 30th is in 2 days, and the federal government is still denying access to end-of-life care. For months, 6 professional orders have been asking for the criminal code to be harmonized with Quebec's law. We're 2 days from the deadline, and because the federal government has done nothing, there are doctors who are worried about the legal limbo around this issue. Will the federal government modify the criminal code and stop endangering access to care for sick patients? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General. I appreciate the question, and I appreciate the member across the way and his hard work on this issue. What I want to note is what the Minister of Healthcare said a moment ago. We are very aware of what the government of Quebec wants to do. We are also aware that we need to consult all the other provinces to make sure that we move forward with a national consensus on this issue. That is the best way to move forward. It's the method that we've used so far. We'll continue to work this way. The Honourable Member from Okan. The Bloc Québécois isn't calling for preferential treatment in the criminal code. It's a way forward to make sure that there's a proper legal framework in place for end-of-life care. Our bill, C-390, would allow provinces that have set a law and which are ready to move forward without risk with advance request. It respects the rhythm that the provinces are working at. It shows respect for healthcare professionals and respect for patients who want to make decisions regarding their own body and their own care. The government's been dragging its feet for 1.5 years. When will it act? The Honourable Minister of Health. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have, I really appreciate the work that my colleague across the way has done. I lost my grandmother to Alzheimer's. It was very, very difficult for my family. I understand this subject. It's a truly delicate subject, and it's absolutely essential that there's a national conversation. And I need the time to speak with my counterpart in the provinces and territories and to make sure that the system is ready, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Battleford, Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberals are simply just not worth the cost. Low-income Canadians are now spending 80% of their income on housing and food. The NDP Liberals' housing and food inflation is forcing millions of Canadians to rely on food banks. Still, this Liberal government is hell-bent on continuing to increase the cost of groceries by their punishing carbon tax. Will the Prime Minister give Canadians the carbon tax election that they so desperately need?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we're making investments to help support families and children across this country. We've seen almost 1 million families who have benefited from our $10 a day national child care program. We've seen 3.5 million families who are receiving our Canada Child Benefit each and every month, providing much-needed support. We've seen CCB help lift hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty. These are investments that we're making on this side of the House to ensure that we're there for Canadians and families.
The Honourable Member from Battleford, Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, that Liberal government is pushing Canadians to the brink, and they should be ashamed of their carbon tax fixation and that it has made life's basic necessities unaffordable. Housing costs have doubled, and food bank usage has soared past 2 million visits per month. It has gotten so dire that 30% of food banks are now running out of food. Mr. Speaker, it's quite simple. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election so that Conservatives can offer Canadians some relief?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
It's getting a little bit difficult to take anything seriously that comes from that side of the House. If there was an actual volition to address child poverty, maybe they wouldn't have sent checks to millionaires and then taxed that money back. If there was an actual volition to address child food security, maybe they would get behind the National School Food Program. All they know is cuts. And what does that mean? That means cuts to taxes if you're rich and cuts to services if you have less. That's not what we stand for on this side of the House. We'll continue to fight for Canadians.
The honourable member from Cumberland Colchester.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost, and Canadians are hurting. This government has made life miserable for Nova Scotians with their crushing carbon tax that has increased food prices by 23%. And of course, on top of that, they plan to quadruple the carbon tax. What's the result? 53% more Nova Scotians are going to food banks now than 5 years ago. Almost 40,000 Nova Scotians rely on food banks every month, 12,000 of whom are children. Will the Prime Minister call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, it is extremely difficult to take a question of that nature from a Conservative member who himself goes on trips worth tens of thousands of dollars, sipping $1,700 bottles of champagne, while at the same time comes to Ottawa so he can oppose policies that give free food to kids in school.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, the Liberal Party has no right to speak about expensive vacations or expensive food or dinner parties or anything like that. The Liberals are literally known for doing that kind of stuff, especially Trudeau. Multi-$100 million vacations this guy goes on all the time on taxpayers' money.
Just guess a number. That number is 2 million people, Mr. Speaker. That's an increase of 90% in 5 years. While people go hungry and community groups collapse, the Liberals aren't doing anything. Happy with their results. When will they have the courage to take on the ultra-rich who are stuffing their faces while people are starving? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to say we need to have courage and heart. My colleague is right to insist on the hardships many families are living through, including in my riding. That's why we have to have heart. And to have heart is supporting the school food program, which my honourable colleague voted for. Why are the Conservatives against breakfast clubs in schools, associations in my riding that feed children every single day? Why do the Conservatives call them bureaucratic?
From Port Moody, Coquitlam.
From Halifax to Port Moody, Coquitlam, all Canadians should be able to get where they need to go on public transit. But for people living with disabilities, public transit often comes with barriers. The Liberals told people with disabilities they'd make sure cities had funding for accessible transit. But just like with every Liberal promise, it's been delayed and forgotten. Will the Liberals finally deliver the promised funding for accessible public transit, or will they keep leaving persons with disabilities?
No, they won't give you the money for that. They just sent another $5 billion to Ukraine or whatever.
Housing, infrastructure, and communities.
For her question, it's important that we make investments in public transit because we know the disproportionate impact it has on low-income families, on seniors, and yes, Canadians living with disabilities. We're moving forward with what will be the largest investment in the history of this country when it comes to public transit. Exactly. This includes new baseline funding that will provide long-term, reliable allocations of funding to municipalities that will be made available, information will be made available to those partners over the next number of weeks. We are also launching large regional plans to allow massive expansions and significant new investments in active transportation, zero emissions vehicles, and yes, transit systems that will be accessible to make sure that every Canadian has the ability to navigate their needs in their community.
The honourable member from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, foreign interference poses a real threat to Canadians and our democracy. In this context, it's alarming that all but one of the opposition leaders obtained their security clearance. I have a simple question for the leader of the Conservative Party. When is he going to get his security clearance, address risk within his own party, and put...
I'm just going to make sure...
Greg's gonna lay the smack down.
As you know, questions in question period need to be directed toward the administration of government. The honourable members.
Mr. Speaker, foreign interference poses a real threat to Canadians.
And your government has allowed it to happen.
It's alarming that all but one of the opposition leaders obtained their security clearance. Mr. Speaker, to the federal government, what are we doing to ensuring that the security of our democracy is protected?
Oh boy.
That all opposition leaders get their security...
Order.
Yeah, the fact that all 4 of those people, there's probably more than those 4 people too. I want to hear this idiot.
And foreign interference poses a real threat for Canada's national security. Foreign actors want to create uncertainty in our institutions. It's time for all of us to take foreign interference seriously and stop the spread of that uncertainty.
Your government has allowed the foreign interference. Wild. Actually wild. They keep saying this. Mary Ng is in such an important position. Scary. I was going to say the fact that there are multiple people in this foreign interference scandal that are in our government, multiple positions of our government. This is really bad. Like, this is beyond. Like, this needs to be something that we all need to really worry about. We have people in our government that are not here for good intentions, and obviously a lot of these people, like this guy, don't have good intentions, or they claim they have good intentions, but when it comes to other countries manipulating our government, manipulating our people, that's very scary. That is beyond scary.
The honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, they are not worth the cost.
And our government is sitting here playing games, running around in circles with the SDTC, as we have foreign actors from different countries. I'm just going to call them actors. Foreign political actors in our government. It is not good. Our government is, it's a joke. It truly is.
On an $800,000 house, this will save home buyers $40,000. Wow. Will the NDP Liberals axe the federal tax on housing, or will they continue to fund their housing photo op program?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
From India to China to wherever.
I thank the honourable member for her question. It's interesting because she represents a part of Kelowna. I was in Kelowna a year ago last week to announce the Housing Accelerator Fund would be contributing $31.5 million to her community. What her leader actually announced this morning is that he's going to cut that fund. She is now in the awkward position of defending an increase of taxes to her constituents of $31.5 million. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we're going to advocate for programs that get homes built, not for cuts to the communities that we represent, which is simply shameful.
The honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' own housing advisors said this morning that the Liberals' photo op fund, the so-called Housing Accelerator Fund, is either pointless or ineffective. And this government has spent billions of dollars. And in fact, housing starts are down by Canada's 2 largest cities, 20% in Vancouver and Toronto each. Under this NDP Liberal government, housing costs have doubled, rising faster than any other G7 country. And this is a made-in-Canada issue. In 2015, it took 39% of the average Canadian's income to cover home ownership costs, and now it's 60%.
I don't know, because they mention Pierre's clearance every time this whole interference scandal is brought up. They don't answer the question. They don't say anything about what is actually going on. They just say, well, the guy on the other side, the opposition, he's going against Canadians because he doesn't have his clearance.
By $31.5 million on ratepayers in Kelowna. 1 year ago, last week, I personally announced, where I shared with the Council, including the former Conservative Member of Parliament for Kelowna, that they were grateful for this money that was going to help them build homes more quickly. In this House, it is unbelievable to me that any Member of Parliament would listen to their constituents at home, come to Ottawa, and demand that Ottawa take money from them. We are going to advance programs that build homes and support communities. It is unthinkable that a member would come and oppose money for the...
The honourable member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, I'm having a hard time listening to the Liberal Housing Minister defend policies from his government that have failed an entire generation of Canadians from our generation who dream of owning a home one day. He continues to talk about the Housing Accelerator Fund, but the Liberals' own housing advisor describes this fund as nothing more than a heist of tax dollars flowing from the feds to the municipalities. That's right. We know the NDP Liberals have turned their backs on a generation of Canadians. When will they stop overtaxing housing so young Canadians can buy a home?
Not good question. The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, it's interesting to me how often I see the Canadian Conservatives borrow their policy positions from right-wing populists in the United States.
Yes. Oh my God, here we go again.
This member learned to advocate for programs that would cut affordable housing. Perhaps it was when he was chatting with his roommate at Yale Law School that he learned how to oppose programs that were going to provide birth control to Canadian women. Maybe it's his engagement in the United States that causes him to deal with the policies to legalize assault-style firearms. Mr. Speaker, in this House, on this side of the House, we will advocate for policies that build more homes more quickly, not oppose them at every turn.
You just brought up a bunch of random United States stuff.
I'm surprised that this Liberal housing minister continues to turn his back on a generation of Canadians because he's clearly not focused on his job. He wants to talk about what's happening in other countries. Let's talk about what's happening in our country, Mr. Speaker.
That's right.
Exactly.
The last time Conservatives were in power, houses cost half of what they cost right now. Currently today, under this Liberal government, nearly 39% of the total taxes on new homes in Ontario are going to politicians and bureaucrats in Ottawa. When will this government agree with Conservatives and end the federal GST on housing so young Canadians can...
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker,
Oh, brace your ears.
let me tell you what we will never agree with. We will never agree to the Conservative agenda of cuts and austerity. Cuts that will hit the most vulnerable hardest. And Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives, they've been trying to hide their true colors from Canadians.
Let me guess.
Today, Mr. Speaker, the
Maple
Conservative
syrup?
leader, he made a mistake.
MAGA?
And he admitted what he really
Donald
intends
Trump?
to do. I'm going to quote him. We're going to cut 2 programs for sure, and more beyond that. So the question today is, what are they going to cut next? And we know it, everything that Canadians...
What are the programs, though, Freeland? What ones are they? If they say they're going to cut them, then which ones are they?
L'honorable député de Rivière.
The Honourable Member for Rivière du Nord. Mr. Speaker, one of the most powerful and dangerous criminal groups are the Arab Power Group, the 2 leaders of which are locked up in prison. And yet it is from federal penitentiaries, that Younes Aitaki, the leader of the criminal group, and Sylvain Kabuchi, his number 2, run their operations. Arsons, protection rackets, murder. Nothing stops these new criminal organizations, especially not being in federal prison, apparently. Can the minister explain how gangs that sow terror and death in the streets of Montreal can be run from federal prisons?
So Greg does mute the mic a lot, but sometimes I do mute it when I speak or whatever, so sometimes it might be him, sometimes it might be me.
These are concerns that are shared by everyone in this House. I was able to meet union representatives and Correctional Services Canada officials, so we could talk about extra technology that we could implement and add to those that already exist to make sure that examples like my colleague do not happen. We are also working with the Quebec Correctional Service and Minister Bonnardel to give them these tools as well. The Honourable Member for Rivière du Nord. Mr. Speaker, according to Kingpin Gregory Woolley, who was himself murdered in the parking lot of a community health centre in the presence of his wife and their child, the Arab Power Group is out of control and the next gang war will be a bloodbath.
Whoa!
The leaders are in prison and they have nothing to lose, and yet they run their criminal operations from cell phones that are smuggled into federal prisons. We know it, the government knows it, the media reports it. How is it that notorious criminals still have access to phones in prison? Why isn't the minister doing anything about it? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, our colleague knows full well that the government is doing a lot for this. We've invested in technology. I myself went to a federal prison in Quebec and I saw the technology that exists. I saw how we can stop drones from reaching prisons. Of course, we won't talk about the implementing technology because the information is not public, because that would give criminal gangs information to circumvent our measures. We will continue to invest in these technologies and we will do everything that is necessary to protect people in prisons and outside. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the Liberal bloc is proving every day that it is not worth the cost of housing. The Liberal bloc doubled rents, mortgage payments and down payments. Only the common sense Conservatives will eliminate the federal sales tax on new homes. That's $40,000 in savings or $2,200 a year in mortgage payments on an $800,000 home. Mr. Speaker, will the bloc-supported Liberals have the courage to abolish the federal sales tax on housing, or will they continue to fund their photo-op programmes? The Honourable Minister for Tourism. Mr. Speaker, I have a question for my dear colleague across the way. What will he answer to Quebecers who, when he says that to gain access to property, he and his party will cut social and affordable housing programs? What will his answer be for Quebecers when he will have to announcement that he will cut the 8,000 social housing units in his riding? On this side of this House, we give access to housing, but we give a roof to the most vulnerable, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, under the previous Conservative government, our leader built 195,000 housing units. At the time, the proportion of a family's average income spent on housing was 39%. Today, it is 60%, Mr. Speaker. The Liberals' failed housing policies have ruined Canadians' purchasing power. Mr. Speaker, the $8 billion Liberal programs have doubled the cost of rents, mortgages and down payments in 9 years. When will the Liberals and the Bloc call an election to finally give Canadians affordable housing? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague perhaps doesn't know this yet. He keeps talking about affordable housing. Perhaps he should check the statistics. The answer given to information asked last year, 6 affordable housing units that the Conservative leader built when he was housing minister throughout the country. So I'd like to ask him how only 6 were built. But these 6 housing units can't even be found. We've been trying to find them. We can't find them, Mr. Speaker. It beggars belief. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner has reported there were allegedly only 113 privacy breaches at the Canada Revenue Agency between the years of 2020 and 2024. But CBC Radio-Canada reports that the number has risen to more than 31,000 security breaches directly affecting 62,000 Canadian taxpayers. The CRA now claims to have issued payments totaling $190 million in connection with confirmed cases of fraud since 2020. The Minister has tried to hide this information from the public and parliamentarians. Will she allow Canadians to recoup this $190 million? The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to say that fraud is completely unacceptable and that we have undertaken measures to fight it. The CRA is a target of choice because within the agency there's a lot of personal information and benefits are processed, tax returns are processed, but our systems are robust, Mr. Speaker. The agency has methods to protect, detect and block attempts of fraud. And every time there is an attempt that is detected, the person involved is noted and is informed. So we are making every effort to fight the situation. The Honourable Member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, over 30 years ago, the Supreme Court of Canada established the right to abortion in Canada in a safe way for their reproductive health. But today I'm concerned. I'm concerned because Conservative MPs continue to put forth petitions and bills. Some are even going to Florida to anti-choice rallies. It's not their business, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister of Economic Development today reaffirm the government's commitment to supporting women's reproductive health and women's rights as a whole? The Honourable Minister for Tourism. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about the right of women to choose, women are concerned from coast to coast to coast. I would like to commend the courage of the MP for Richmond Athabasca, who unveiled the Conservative Party's hidden agenda. He said, I've seen a rise in the number of pro-life MPs within the organisation, strong members who influence policy. One of the Conservatives' hidden agendas is to elect anti-choice candidates and adopt anti-choice laws. On
I
this
thought
side
she
of the
was
House, we're
going to
protecting
say
the right of
elect
women,
Donald
and we
Trump or
reject
something like that.
anti-choice candidates. That is what it looks like to defend women truly.
The honourable member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal government, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. In the latest scandal to hit the Canada Revenue Agency, over 60,000 taxpayers had their personal private information hacked. Not only are these individuals' information floating around on the internet, it also costs taxpayers money. Over $190 million have been improperly paid to scam artists because of privacy breaches at Revenue Canada. Wow. Will the minister get information, call in the RCMP about this privacy breach, and so that taxpayers can be repaid?
Then I have Ministre Revenu National.
The Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fraud is completely unacceptable. We agree on this, and our government is undertaking necessary measures. The agency, rather, is a choice of target. There's a lot of personal information, many benefits are administered, tax returns as well. But the agency systems are solid. And when there is fraud attempts, we can inform the person who's been affected. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So you should inform all of Canadians about your god-awful activities as a government.
For one, has been without a contract since March of 2023, and they've been on strike for almost 6 months. The employer has called Canadian workers lazy, refused to negotiate a wage increase, refused to bargain, and is effectively trying to bust the union. The union met with this NDP Liberal minister almost 2 months ago and took the unprecedented step of asking the minister to intervene. His response, crickets. Why is this NDP Liberal minister abandoning Unifor Local 1541?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Labour and for Seniors.
Mr. Speaker, the government, of course, is monitoring the situation closely, indeed daily. Mediators are working with the parties and available to assist at any time, and we urge them to continue their efforts to reach agreements. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission will continue to monitor this company for regulatory compliance to ensure the safety of workers, the public, and the environment. The facility remains secure. There have been no changes to the security of the site. And of course, Mr. Speaker, we will not let workers down, and we've made it repeated entreaties to the owner to return to the bargaining table.
The honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon.
I can tell the Unifor workers at Local 1541 are going to be absolutely inspired by that heartfelt response from this NDP Liberal minister. Why are these NDP Liberals never responsible for anything, Mr. Speaker? 2 million Canadians using a food bank? Not our fault. Violent thugs out on bail? It's the province's fault. A local employer trying to bust a union? There's nothing we can do but read these talking points. If these NDP Liberals aren't responsible for anything and they can't fix anything, why don't they get out of the way and let a common sense Conservative government fix their mess?
The Honourable Minister for Labour and for Seniors.
We'll take no lessons from this right-to-work Conservative Party in terms of labour relations in Canada. The people who've stood up repeatedly to vote to remove power from unions, to force unions to reveal their financial statistics, and also to make sure that unions find it hard to certify in workplaces. These union-busting Conservatives will give us no lessons. I work daily with my colleague from Canada Carleton on this issue, and we will make sure that these workers get the negotiations and the contract that they deserve.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member from Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, we know that actors like Russia, China and India have attempted to interfere in Canada. Recently, the RCMP revealed that agents linked to the Indian government are involved in serious criminal activities in Canada.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of unions either, so I was kind of like whatever on that whole thing. Don't really care too much. Unions were good back in the day. I don't think they are necessary now, but to be fair, if a job still has a union, then it's legally allowed to. There's nothing wrong with that.
Indian government are involved in serious criminal activities in Canada, including extortion and a murder of a Canadian citizen. It is time for all political party leaders to put country before party. My question for the government House Leader is, why won't the Leader of the Opposition do the right thing and join all opposition leaders and get a security clearance so he can act on foreign interference and protect Canadians?
Right on, Judy. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Davenport for that really important question when it comes to protecting our national security.
Oh my God, why did it get so loud?
Mr. Speaker, when Canadians send us here, they think that we're going to do one thing, and that's putting the national security of Canada first and putting Canadians first. Mr. Speaker, every leader of a party in this place.
Did anybody tell her that she looks like a potato sack?
The leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. The question is why? What is he hiding? What is he trying to protect? And why is he putting himself and his party ahead of the security of Canadians?
She looks like gravy.
The Honourable Member from Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, under this Liberal government, multi-billion-dollar companies feel emboldened to use shady tactics to rip off Canadians. After this government rubber-stamped the Rogers takeover of Shaw, they promised lower costs but have snuck in price hikes for Canadians. The Liberals have done nothing to protect people. Instead, they rewarded Rogers with over $165 million in federal money. Rogers must be put on notice, reverse the cuts, or be banned from federal contracts. Will the Liberals have the courage to do it? Yes or no?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our government's top priority from day one is making life more affordable for Canadians, and we're focused on increasing competition and lowering prices in the telecom sector. Since 2023, we're holding companies like Rogers accountable by eliminating switching fees and attacking extra and unnecessary fees, so Canadian consumers are empowered to find a plan that works for them. On this side of the aisle, we're standing up for Canadian consumers by helping them regain their negotiating power. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Richmond, Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, it has been reported that CBC Radio Canada handed out $18 million in bonuses to executives in 2024. That's quite the situation. Executives are receiving multi-million-dollar bonuses, whilst hundreds of employees are losing their jobs. Yet the public broadcaster is demanding ever greater subsidies year after year to do its job. All this is damaging the reputation of CBC Radio Canada and all its workers. My question to the Prime Minister is simple. Does he agree with these bonuses? And, if not, what does he intend to do to put an end to them? The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for Richmond Athabasca for his question, but also for his courage in denouncing the Conservative Party of Canada and its positions when it comes to the right of women to choose. I would also like to remind him that CBC Radio Canada is an arm's-length organisation that manages its own budget, and that is the reason for which we've created a society where the government, including the potential Conservative government, would not be able to butt into their decision-making.
Honourable colleagues, I wish to let you know that the volume of earpieces will now be reset.
Okay, I think question period is over. We're going to see what happens here. Should be a vote as per usual.
Affaire courante.
Routine proceedings. Tabling of documents.
Oh, we're going straight to routine
Introduction
proceedings.
of government bills. Statements by ministers. Reports from interparliamentary delegations. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Rural Economic Development and Minister responsible for the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to the standing orders, I have the honour to table to the House, in both official languages, the following reports from the Canadian branch of the Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie concerning its participation at the 44th Ministerial Conference of La Francophonie in Yaoundé, Cameroon, from November 4th to 5th, 2023, and Good Office's mission, Libreville, in Gabon, from November 6th to 7th, 2023. And the report of the Canadian branch of the Assemblée parlementaire de la Francophonie, meeting of the APF Education, Culture and Communications Committee and the Parliamentary Network on HIV/AIDS, Tuberculosis and Malaria in Bucharest, Romania from April 3rd to 5th, 2024. Also, the meeting of the Committee on Economic, Social and Environmental Affairs in Luang Prabang, Laos from April 10th to 11th, 2024. And finally, the meeting of the Parliamentary Affairs Committee in Podgorica, Montenegro, from April 24th to 26th, 2024. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting reports from committees. Dépôt de projet de loi émanant des députés.
Private member. Oh, rather. Sorry.
Oh, I didn't see him. Mr. Casey, the honourable member for Charlottetown. Sorry.
Madam Speaker, I have the honour to present in both official languages the 21st report of the Standing Committee on Health in relation to Bill.
Okay, that is gonna do it for me today, I think. Yeah, they're just gonna be doing routine proceedings. I don't think there's gonna be any questions of interest or whatever the hell they're called, or any vote today. Interesting to see that Pierre was not there. I think he was in Ottawa doing that live stream he did earlier, talking about housing, cutting GST on houses under $1 million. I don't know. He's making a lot of promises on top of having to fix the entire country. So I guess we shall see what happens if he does get elected. All I know is Trudeau, he needs to fucking go, and he needs to go as soon as possible. I will see you guys tomorrow for question period. Roughly the same time, most likely. Thank you all for joining me. If you are new here, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button, and I will see you tomorrow. Like I said, roughly the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard. Take it easy. Have a good day or night, depending on where you are from.